Hi there. Recently, Dr. Umar Johnson gave a very good account of the relationship between paedophiles and LGBTQ. He said it's because paedophiles want a get out of jail free card, and if they keep pushing the idea that children have sexual choice and can decide to have their breasts, ovaries, testicles removed in the name of freedom of choice and sexual identity, then they're old enough to have sex with an adult. If you start sexualizing children in terms of their identities when they're still minors, then you are opening the door to sexual activity with them. And no paedophile wants to go to prison. So the whole doctrinaire LGBTQ, in-your-face sexualizing of the human race from the moment people are born suits the perverted. But it goes much deeper than that. You have to go back to understand just how pernicious and far-reaching this is. Back to at least 1968, a revolutionary year, riots in Paris, Vietnam protests, anti-establishment, anti-capitalist. And there was a powerful relationship between French intellectuals of the time and paedophilia that has grown and affected much of Europe since then, including the UK. Here's how it happened. In 1977, the leading French newspaper, Le Monde, presented a petition demanding the age of consent be lowered to 13. Most of the leading French intellectuals of the time signed it. Michel Foucault, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, Roland Barthes, Derrida, and many others, including prominent doctors and psychologists. And most of these were against any age of consent. Just think of that, any age of consent. Michel Foucault, whose work influenced a whole generation and beyond in Europe and the States, said in a radio interview in 1979, "This notion of consent is a trap. What is sure is that the legal form of an intersexual consent is nonsense." So what these people were arguing for was to get rid of all laws that protected children from sexual abuse. Foucault himself was involved in many sex scandals, including with minors. This insistence that sex with children was fine was part of a general left-wing desire to overthrow the whole of society and several thousand years of civilization. Protecting children, indeed any laws, was seen as part of a hideous exercise in power that should be destroyed, along with everything else. And along with that went a sort of victim competition. Who is the most oppressed? Because you could only be either a victim or an oppressor. And if children were subject to laws designed to protect them, that showed they were victims and had to be liberated. So paedophilia flies in under the radar and hides behind the banner of revolution and liberation and freedom. No one should ever underestimate the far-reaching influence of this moment. This group of intellectuals was very powerful. They were starting to control the whole of the educational system and have influence way beyond it. And when you control the educational system, you control everything because you are indoctrinating the next generation who will themselves be teachers, civil servants, doctors, politicians, journalists, the whole caboodle. If you control education, politics, the media, and then you control everything. And because the law was itself seen as oppressive and a bad thing, then paedophiles have an open season on children. When I was a student, this group of French intellectuals was seen as cool and sexy because they had the whiff of revolution and freedom and change. But that whiff covered the underlying stink of a pernicious ideology of gender and race politics that has led directly to the cancel culture, anti-intellectual, doctrinaire, bullying, illogical and destructive landscape that we now find ourselves mired in. You can draw a line from this moment in 1968 to a primary school teacher today in England telling infants that they can choose their own gender. It is part of the same raggedy fault line of child abuse.